there was always this tension, my mom and dad always wanted me to work for a big company with benefits, right? And I just knew I just don't do well in big companies. Still to this day, I don't like working where there's bureaucracies and people creating little fiefdoms that they try and protect, and they're focused on the wrong things, right? Instead of getting stuff done and building better products and services to serve customers and so, they're it's just messed up to me. And I don't tolerate fools very well. I'm better now. I'm in my 50s now. I'm so much more patient. At that time, I couldn't stand people who would say stupid things, you know. And so I never did very well. So I thought, I would like to have my own business.
Welcome to the Founder's Journey podcast, where we unravel the life stories of unique and successful entrepreneurs. We will take a deep dive into their highs and lows and over-the-top accomplishments. So get ready for the Founder's Journey podcast with your host, Jimmy Dulambakis. All right, everyone. Thank you for coming to the Founder's Journey podcast. I have Andy Cwik here. How you doing, Andy?
I'm doing great. Excited to be here.
Thanks for coming on. Super excited to hear your life story and your journeys. So I want to dive in.
Sure.
Let's start from the beginning. Where did you grow up?
Well, I grew up in a very small town called Morris, Illinois, which is surrounded by cornfields. I live in Chicago now, but this is not even a suburbs. It's beyond the suburbs. It's 12,000 people. It was 12,000 people when I lived there, and it's still 12,000 people. I was actually born in Anaheim, California, but my family moved there to Morris when I was 2. So, yeah.
So you grew up there. And
Yeah.
so how was it growing up? Like, basically open land, open space. Did you, was everything spread out, or was there kids in the neighborhood? Like, how was it?
I lived like in what you would look like a suburban neighborhood. There were kids across the street like that. There were areas that were more spread out in town. People, particularly people I grew up with a lot of farmers and, in school and stuff. And they didn't live necessarily in neighborhoods. They lived out in spread out areas, but I lived more of a city area. My dad was worked as a controller, which would probably be equivalent of a modern day CFO at an aluminum factory, which was about 20 minutes away. So we were more city oriented. We weren't farmers.
And it's interesting because the school system, right? Like the public school system was built around farming, right? Because that's why you have often summers
Yeah.
and whatnot, right? There's a part of it's structured that way.
That's why we still have our summers off. Because the kids had to work on the farm. And I actually did do some of that. I would, I baled, they would be baling hay. And there was actually a big field that's just not a field anymore, but across the street, and they would bale the hay. And it's crazy. These people would let us go and do that. They would never let you do that today because you could get killed on one of those things. And I did tasseled corn in the summer when I was probably like 12, 13 years old. We got to go down the rows and pull off the tassels so the corn properly pollinates. I did do some farm stuff and helped neighbor families cut wood for their fireplaces. I did do all that sort of stuff, but it was just kind of like a fun distraction for me.
Did you chop the wood as a kid?
Well, they wouldn't let me handle the chainsaw because I was real little. I was probably like 8 or 9 years old, but me and my friends would haul the wood as they cut it and put it in the back of a pickup truck. And we thought that was, exciting. This was before iPads and everything. So you only had 3 or 4 channels on television. So this was exciting stuff for us.
So tell me, what was the family dynamic like? You had your dad, your mom, you had any siblings?
Yeah. So my dad and my mom are first generation Americans. Is that first or second? Their parents were immigrants.
So they're first generation.
They're
You're
first
second.
generation. Yeah. My dad's family was from Poland, and my mother's family is from the Dalmatian Islands off of Croatia. So my mother would say she was a Dalmatian, not a Croatian. And my mother grew up on the southeast side, almost in Indiana, of Chicago. And my dad grew up in Humboldt Park, which is sort of near West Side, if you're familiar, what used to be a Polish neighborhood at the time. And they, oddly enough, met in a bowling alley in Zama, Japan.
Wow.
Because my dad was in the uh, enlisted for the Korean War. He wasn't drafted, he enlisted. And my mother was over there working as a civilian for the government. And they're both from Chicago, but they met in Japan. And my oldest sister was born there. And then they moved around and eventually ended up in Morris. And my dad left the military and then went to college later in life, became an accountant. And they had my sister, and they had my brother while they were living in Chicago. He's 4 years older than me. My sister's 11 years older than me. And then me. My mother had multiple miscarriages in between. That's why we're so spread out. So I was the baby of the family. I went to Catholic school in town, private Catholic school in town for up through 7th grade. 8th grade, I went to a public school. And then I went on to a all boys Benedictine military school. It was a boarding school in Aurora, Illinois. If you don't know where Aurora is, if you're old enough to remember Wayne's World, it
Yeah.
was broadcast from Aurora, Illinois. That's to put Aurora on the map. And that school is no longer a boarding school. The military is optional, and it's going co-ed, I think, in a year or so. So it's dramatically changed from when I went there. But that's where I went. My brother went to a boarding school in LaSalle, Peru, that was Benedictine boarding school called St. Bede's, but it was not military. And my sister went to school, graduated from Morris High School. So, and my dad worked as I said, as a controller. My mother stayed home until I was about 13, and then she kind of had my dad had a degree. My mother went to 2 years of college. She did not have a college degree. Um, and she said the reason was largely because at that time, even if she got a degree, there weren't a lot of jobs for women to do like
Mm.
there are now. So it was kind of it wouldn't have been that useful to her anyway. So, and then she worked until she was probably in her 50s. My parents are since deceased, but in the last 6 or 7 years. But that was kind of the dynamic. And then when in Morris, I was in Boy Scouts and all that typical stuff and camping and stuff like that. But there as far as entrepreneurship goes, there really wasn't anything. The entrepreneurs I knew were, they owned small businesses like bakeries, or they were welders, or they were farmers or stuff like that. But nobody building, businesses outside of the service industry that were, at a small clientele.
Let me ask you, I wanted to go back a little bit. You mentioned you're one of three, right?
Yep.
At that time, were there being the your parents were first generation, you were second. Were families big? Were there lots of kids? Were families with like 3 or 4 kids? Or is that how it was in your neighborhood?
My most of the families, I would say, well, it was a mix. Like the kids across the street had 2 kids that I played with. There were 2 kids in each family. One of those families moved away at some point, and they subsequently had 3 more kids. I think they ended up with 5, but that was after they kind of left the area.
Yeah.
One of my best friends were the Garys. They had 6 kids.
Yeah.
They were in it, I'm still friends with them till this day, and they were an interesting story. Their father had been a priest, and he went through laicization. He didn't want to be a priest anymore, and he got married and had 6 kids. But I was really close with them, and some of them I'm still close with today. So it was kind of a mix. I would say the Garys were the exception, though. I would say most of the families were around 2 children.
Too true. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
My
just
mother
interesting.
my mother said she always wanted to have 4, and it just didn't work out because she had, all those miscarriages. There was actually one after me too.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell me about like was the neighborhood, it was a suburb of like neighborhood, kids are playing, you're running around, but you're
Yep.
also going to school with kids that are, their parents own farms and
Yep.
all that. Now, school wise, how were you in school? Were you a good student? Were you on the A's, or were you more on the C's? Like, where were you?
So I was bored to death in grade school. I hated grade. You'll rarely hear somebody say this. I hated grade school. I loathed grade school. I couldn't wait to be done with grade school. I liked high school a little bit better. I loved college because they let you pick what you study. you know, and part of the reason I hated grade school, and I didn't know it at the time until my 40s, but I have Asperger's. I have autistic spectrum disorder, but it's used to be called Asperger's. And it wasn't really, I was born in 69. It wasn't really identified as an official thing until like 84, I think. So I was out of grade school and stuff. So I couldn't stand the fluorescent lights. I couldn't stand the metal lockers banging. I couldn't stand all the kids making all this noise. And, um, and the diet at the time, my mother hated to cook, so I ate a lot of peanut butter and jelly and Hostess Twinkies and stuff like that, which is terrible for anybody with my condition. It's terrible for anybody with any. Nobody should be eating that stuff anyway, but especially somebody with autism. That made me tired and lethargic, on top of being annoyed by all the sound and really bored with the thing. I mean, I really always felt like it's there for socialization purposes. And I've been, incidentally, I've got 5 kids, and I've always been relieved when they go to grade school and they love it, because I'm always miserable thinking they're going to hate it like I hated it. None of them have. And my youngest is 6, and she loves grade school, so I'm relieved about that. But the socialization, I wasn't interested in socializing with people. I didn't, I was, you've seen people with autism, they really rather be off on their own, studying something, doing their own sort of thing. So I did okay. I mean, I didn't flunk, but I was just miserable being there. It was just something I had to do. When I got to high school, I liked it a lot better. You got to do, you got a little bit of choice over what you studied. I liked the professors better. I had a lot more male teachers as opposed to grade school. I had, which I related better to than the female teachers in grade school. And I liked the military aspect of it. I knew I wouldn't do well in the military, but I did like that part of it for, that kind of being a fake soldier.
Did you like
Learning.
the structure of it?
I like the structure. I like learning how to march. I like shooting rifles. I liked um formation. I liked all of that stuff, polishing brass and shining shoes and crap like that. Um, but I knew that I would never do well in the military itself. It was never an option for me. My dad had been in the military for 8 years. And he loved it. And he only got out because my mother didn't want to have to move every 2 years, like you have to do when you're in the military. And I'm glad she insisted on that, because I would not have done well moving every 2 years. Um, but yeah, that was grade school for me. High school, I did much better. College, I did great.
So tell me, you're in so you go to the military school, you like the structure, how are you doing? And I guess it's 2 questions. One, how did you do in high school? And 2, at the tail end of high school, what was your life plan? Like, what were you, every kid that's 16, 17, 18 is trying to figure out, okay, I'm going to finish college, I'm going to finish high school, go to college. Like, what were you trying to do?
I didn't have, because of my parents' background, I didn't have a lot of good guidance towards the end of high school. I kind of just defaulted into a school and a program, but my parents didn't know to take me around the different schools. They didn't know to help me prepare for the SAT and ACT. Incidentally, I'm terrible at standardized tests. Anything under pressure, I don't do well at. I like to play chess, but I can't play time chess. I can't stand the pressure. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay.
And so I kind of fumbled around a lot. And I actually, not as a promotion, but as an aside, I did write a book about this recently and put it on Amazon. And it's targeted towards people late teens through, later careers, uh, career switchers. And it's all this stuff I wish I would have known when I was 17 and 18 years old about figuring out, excuse me, what your career should be, how you should go about that, why work is important, all of that stuff that I wish I'd have known when I was 17 or 18. And my parents really didn't have the wherewithal or experience to be able to guide me in any of that. And you would think that the school that I went to would have had more infrastructure around that, and they really just didn't. Now, I just had a kid he's a freshman in college now, and the high school he went to a private Catholic school here in Chicago. They were marvelous. They were meeting with him all the time about what school are you going to, or visiting schools. What are you thinking about your career? The place I went to is called Marmy, and they didn't do any of that, but so it's gotten so much better. So I just went to Eastern Illinois for a number of years. I got there. I didn't know what I wanted to study. My parents were of the position that you really should just go get a piece of paper so that you can have a better paying job, so that you can have better, more a better leisure life, more better vacations, stuff when you're not working, which is a terrible way to go about it because you spend a third of your life working, right? And it's a terrible way to think about those things. And yeah, so I ended up, my parents wanted me, my dad thought I should study accounting. He liked accounting. I tried it. I hated accounting. I defaulted into engineering, but um that one just okay. I didn't see where that was going to lead, so I dropped out, and then for a year, and then I went and studied. I said, screw it, I'm going to go do what I want to do. I went and studied music for 2 years at a junior college, and that was really kind of like things kind of took off for me at that point because I was finally studying something I was really engaged in. I really enjoyed it. I was always big on music, and so I did that for 2 years. I got an associate's degree in music, and then right around that time, the tidal wave of the World Wide Web was starting. That famous memo from, it's the mid-90s. The famous memo from Bill Gates when he was still at Microsoft. And I'm reading all these, Wired magazine and all these publications about the internet and stuff, and I was just really, and I should back up. My mother, when I was a kid, was always pushing computers. She was always I was the only kid with a Merlin. I don't know if I still have the damn thing.
I heard it was, yeah. Explain to me, where's a Merlin?
It was a very rudimentary gaming device before you had like the other ones that could play football. It was like one of the first, all it did was like tic-tac-toe and a couple of games like that, but it was like it took a god awful number of batteries and it was huge. My mother bought me one of those. My mother bought me a Commodore 64.
Wow.
And I did, but my dad, being Polish, saves money by not buying the disk drive, the backup device. You had those floppy. So everything I did was gone. I would code. I learned BASIC, and I would write little programs, and everything was gone because I couldn't back it up anywhere. Because my dad thought he saved a little money and not buy the.
What was the program? C. It starts with a C. It was like a program you learned back in like the 90s, C, not C basic. You know what I'm talking about? It's like they were teaching us in school a little bit.
I do know what you're talking about, but I can't think of the name of it.
Yeah, it was called like
it was a Microsoft product, I think.
Yeah, and they taught you how to code with it. I remember taking it in probably middle school. I was like, this is amazing because you could change the colors. Very, very basic. But at the time, I mean, for me, it was light years away.
Right.
So tell me, so you're in computers. So you always kind of had like a little curiosity in computers growing up.
I did.
Your mom pushed you, right?
And when I went to college, I think if I had been introduced to a programming class or everything back then was COBOL, it was mainframe stuff. It wasn't, it wasn't even client server really yet. Client server came a couple of years later. I think if I had been introduced to something along those lines, I think I would have probably fallen in love with it, and then I'd been off to the races. But I had to fumble around for a while, yeah. So let me just make sure nobody. 1 second. I don't want anybody to go ahead. Yep. So I was interested in it, but I kind of fell away from it because I think I just, out of serendipity, I didn't run across it again until the mid-90s when it was just everywhere, and Amazon was starting up and people were trying to figure out how to make the internet work and figure out how to make it so that you can securely pay for things. And, back then, 80% of the internet was porn, that's all there wasn't any legitimate commerce going on and people were trying to figure out how to do that. So I wanted to be a part of that. So I ended up enrolling in a night program. I got a job as a claims adjuster during the day because my brother was a claims adjuster and I saw that he had a lot of independence. He could work from home and stuff like that. And he was out and about. And I thought, well, that'll work good because then I could do that and go to school. So I got a job as a claims adjuster. It took me a little while and I went to night school at DePaul in Chicago and got a degree in computer science. And then I got out and I worked for insurance companies for a while.
But what was your goal? Like in college, you did music for 2 years, right? So that kind
Yeah.
of boosted your creativity, right? Because you said,
And
because
my
you,
confidence. Yeah.
and your confidence,
Because
right? It's something
I had straight A's there. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
liked it, you were
Yeah.
engaged in it, right? And
Yeah.
then, but in college, like in your adulthood, like I'm always curious to know, like, what did you want to do in life? Or was it where your parents were like, hey, look, Andy, just get a degree, get a steady job,
Yeah.
get steady pay. Was it that?
There was always this tension, my mom and dad always wanted me to work for a big company with benefits, right? And I just knew I just don't do well in big companies. Still to this day, I don't like working where there's bureaucracies and people creating little fiefdoms that they try and protect, and they're focused on the wrong things, right? Instead of getting stuff done and building better products and services to serve customers and stuff, they're it's just messed up to me. And I don't tolerate fools very well. I'm better now. I'm in my 50s now. I'm so much more patient. At that time, I couldn't stand people who would say stupid things, you know. And so I never did very well. So I thought, I would like to have my own business. I remember telling my mom, maybe I should own a bar or something like that. I could own a bar and I like music and you can have a bar and plays music. I thought,
Interesting.
well,
Yeah.
that might be a good thing, right?
Yeah.
And that was the extent of what I knew. Had I been living in Silicon Valley, I would have seen all their other things going on and I probably went that way. But, bars were something I could see and I knew, and from college and in the hometown I grew up in, there's, per capita, there's an unusually large number of bars, because there's not a lot to do in Morris. And then when I was around 24 or so, I think I was out of school. I'd gotten my degree. Yeah, I'd gotten my computer science degree and I was working in property and casualty companies. A friend of mine from high school, who is still my best friend today, came to me with an idea, and it was a data encryption idea. He's a PhD in economics, and he could see that it was hard to protect IP. And this was around the time Napster was going on, peer-to-peer sharing. People were stealing content left and right. And we tried to start that. Back at that time, there were like two VCs in Chicago. You had to mail them a business plan. There was no, email wasn't even a thing yet. We didn't have all the infrastructure that we have today. I'm sitting in a co-working space called Tech Nexus now, and there's a lot of these in town now and they have a lot of content and programming for people who want to learn how to be entrepreneurs or network with other entrepreneurs and network. None of that was here, right?
None of
We're
that.
on our own.
Nothing.
Yeah. And I mean, you couldn't even like Google that much, right? There wasn't that much I don't even, Google wasn't even around yet. So, you had to use one of those other early search engines. So there wasn't a lot of, and it was hard to get information. Weirdly, my friend's dad was a successful entrepreneur. He had a tech startup. And for whatever reason, we didn't go to him. If memory serves, I think he didn't want to go to his dad. He wanted to do it on his own.
Yeah.
I think if we'd have went to his dad, we'd have probably gotten somewhere. We did. It failed. We didn't get very far. But I knew that I wanted to do it again. I knew that I wanted to do that. And so off I go, and I'm working,
How long were you working on that company for?
year and a half maybe.
So now you're like 25 and a half, 26.
Yeah. And then I get married.
So hold on. You met a girl. Where'd you meet the girl? At the bar or
at work?
At
At work.
work?
She sat across from me. And
Okay.
that marriage ended up not working out. We have 2 children, but then I'm not working out. So, but she was very corporate. Did well in corporate environments as opposed to me. So we end up following her career for we're married for 13 years. We ended up moving to Cleveland and then Detroit. No, we moved to Detroit, then Cleveland, then Cincinnati over this like 13-year period following her career. And when I was in, and I ended up working in biomedical research, which I loved. I worked at the Cleveland Clinic. I really enjoyed working, doing that work. That was the first job I had that I really enjoyed because I was constantly learning because I worked for somebody who let me attend whatever presentations I wanted. And there were these people doing PhDs doing presentations on, joint therapies and all kinds of stuff. I was working on multiple sclerosis. I was using MRIs to measure brain atrophy and lesion volume in multiple sclerosis patients. So it was all on computers, but I could go to anything. So I was constantly learning. I just loved working there. And then we moved to Cincinnati and I had to leave that job. And then I was a stay-at-home dad for a number of years. And then the marriage ended up falling apart. And then around that time, I started working for MySQL, who was independent at the time, and they were remote, 400 people remote working from their homes. Then they got bought by Sun Microsystems, and they got bought by, um, ultimately now they're owned by Oracle because they bought Sun. And that kind of got me back into the working world. And we all of us, my ex-wife and kids and I all ended up back in Chicago. And I knew I wanted to go back and into some sort of try and start a business again. So I'm attending lots of meetups, which
How
in
old are
Cincinnati,
you now?
I'm around 40.
40.
Back
Okay.
in Cincinnati, there was a little bit going on, and I started attending that stuff. And I actually tried to revive that data encryption company with my friend, and we actually got a meeting with an investor in Cincinnati. But it was a very small. Cincinnati's has grown a lot more. This was like 15 years ago in terms of their tech scene and their entrepreneur scene. But at the time, there was a nascent tech scene there, but nothing like Chicago. So I came back to Chicago. I'm about 40 years old. I'm going to all these meetups, and I meet a guy. Not at a meetup. I meet a guy at a dog park at a dog who worked for a serial entrepreneur, and he was starting this serial entrepreneur was starting up. My friend worked for this guy's third company, but this guy was starting up a fourth company. So I joined as a co-founder, pre-product, pre-revenue, pre-everything. And at this point, I was not coding anymore. I was more project management product, which I liked a lot better than. Oh, I love coding, but to stay good at it, you got to really do it.
All the time.
And if you don't do it for very long, you get bad at it real quick. And I went into product, and so I helped them build their telehealth product and all their and they were having software development problems and stuff like that. And I learned a lot from that guy. This was 2012 when I joined them, and I'm born in '69, so I'm like 43 maybe. And I loved it. I was like, it was a small team of 7 people wearing multiple hats. I don't have to ask for permission for everything. I just make a decision. There's no time to ask for permission, and I just loved it. And they loved me, and it was going great. And I thought, this is great. And I had an idea at the time I was started thinking about the problem that Hubbub is my essentially my third startup. I called the telehealth company my second one. Hubbub is my third, and I started thinking about the problem that we're solving there, which is basically data silos. And I came at it from a million different ways. I didn't know how to build an MVP. I didn't know how any of that stuff you need to know as an entrepreneur. I had learned some working for the telehealth company, but like the nuts and bolts of hiring and cap tables and minimum viable products and stuff like that, I didn't know. But I'm still going to all these meetups, and most of them are technical, like JavaScript meetups and stuff like that, but occasionally not. And I signed up for this one that I ended up not going to, but it was because my wife wanted to do something else, but it was across the street from where we lived at the time, and it was for Founders Institute. And I didn't know anything about Founders Institute. I don't know if you know who they are, but
yeah, I'm aware of them.
they changed my life. dramatic ways. So I didn't go to the meetup, but the guy who runs it, Jason Jacobson, he's the longest serving chapter director for Founders Institute. He's been doing it for 15 years. He's a Chicago director, sent a follow-up email. Hey, if you want to join, there's still to everybody, not just to me, you can join Founders Institute. It's an idea stage accelerator. And I had gone to I knew about Techstars. I knew about 500 startups. I knew about Y Combinator. I'd gone to their events. And I knew, from idea to them, you've got to be full-time, revenue producing, product build. There's a big gap between idea and that, right? And I didn't know how to get to that. Well, and so I got this email and I thought, well, that sounds like bullshit. That doesn't exist. It says you could be working full time, you could be part time, you could be a solo founder. I thought that sounds like somebody's scamming. And then I did a bunch of research on it, and I saw Dale Resi started it, and I saw that he was friends with Elon Musk. They went to college together. I thought, oh, this might be a real thing. And then I saw you have to take this test, and I'm terrible at standardized tests. You have to take this. So I take this test, and back then it wasn't timed. I think it's timed now. And I took like 3 hours on this thing. It's an IQ test and a psychology test. And I take the test, and I thought, well, I submitted, and I thought I'm probably not going to get in. And my wife and I left, and we went to a concert somewhere, and I got an email, welcome to Founders Institute class in 2018 at the point. Founders Institute made all the difference in the world because the mentors in the program, the content is good, but the mentors in the program really helped me. These are all people who are serial entrepreneurs, exited founders. And this is kind of like, they're participating in the equity pool, but they really do it because this is like their hobby. Instead of golfing, they like helping people build
I
startups.
love
This
it.
is their hobby. And so many of them met with me outside of the program and helped me and got me going and helped me figure out how to find a co-founder and help me figure out how to all the stuff you got to do to build a company. I've been off to the races, and so and now I'm Hubbub is still running.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
When you're leaving, so you're in a space where you're working for the startup, right? You're like co-founder. You want to start. You're working on starting your third. You're looking, right? You're looking for connections, and you find the Founder Institute. When you realize the infrastructure and just the people, the camaraderie, I guess, of entrepreneurship there.
Yeah.
What was going on in your head when that happened? Like, how did you feel?
The first thing I thought of, I would have never found these people going to the other stuff I'm going in because they're busy running their companies. They don't go to those other things that I go to. This is the only place I'm going to meet them. And I felt my tribe. These are all people who think like me. They don't like working for big companies generally. Most of them, some of them came from big companies, but they caught the bug and they just want to keep, and they're not doing this because to make money. A lot of them have made a lot of money, but they're doing it because they want to see if I can solve a problem. There's a problem that's driving them nuts. They want to see if they're the person that can do it. A lot of the things I start, I just do it because I want to see if I can actually do it. There's a couple other side projects I'm doing. Like I've got this documentary film company. I'm trying to get a documentary made. And I never intended to do anything in retail, but I've got a friend who's been in retail for 50 years and she needed help. And so now I'm helping her build a retail cafe event space. And the only reason, and she pestered me. I don't really have time to do it, but I think I know how to do it because of these other things. And part of it is that I want to see, can I actually do it? And that's how this group of mentors are, I subsequently, I'm now like an associate with the Founders Institute and a mentor. And, but I'm there every week. We do about 2 cohorts a year. And since 2018, I've been there all along, every week when there's a cohort, and I go to all the recruiting events and stuff like that because I feel like I should get back, because not only did it help me get my own startup going, my third one, and now I'm doing my fourth now too, which is, it just gets easier every time you do it. But also Adeo started VC Lab and then LP Institute. And along with that, he created something called Start Funds. And now I'm creating a micro fund um, with one of the exited founders from Founders Institute. We're co-managing directors on that. And that all came from Adeo. I mean, if Adeo hadn't done all this and if Jason hadn't brought it to Chicago, I would still be spinning my wheels. Yeah.
You know, it's interesting because when I was like 20 years ago, like something kept driving me to be an entrepreneur, right? Like
Yeah.
similar, I can't work in big structured companies because when I get in, I just want to solve problems, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like sometimes I was in a position once and I was trying to change something, like make it improve it. And I
Yeah.
remember a coworker telling me, "Hey man, what are you doing? Like, don't be
Yeah.
messing this up for all
You
of
ruin our
us."
system.
And I'm
We don't
like,
want to,
"Whoa,
we don't
what are
want
you
to work.
talking about? Like, we can fix this problem." No, 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 leave it alone. I said, "Okay." So anyway, I remember going back, this is like 20 years ago, and I was just looking for entrepreneurship programs, anything. And at
Yeah.
the time, a couple universities had some like they called them small business workshops. And
Yeah.
I was in New York City, you know, think about that. I'm
Yeah.
scouring New York City, any class I'm asking, I can't. There was like 2 or 3 classes I went to. They were very helpful, very basic. So I said, okay, what can I do? Read books. Okay. So this is
Yeah.
before Amazon. So I'm reading books. And then I met an entrepreneur, a very successful entrepreneur, who kind of became my mentor.
Yeah.
One of my early startups, I failed. We lost, I think we were like 24 years old. We lost like 50, $60,000, of which half of it we used, we advanced on our credit cards. So we owed it
Yeah.
to the
Yeah.
credit card company. And
Yeah.
then the credit card company shut down my credit card while the debt was open, which is the worst thing
I
that you
know.
do for your credit.
You were spending on spending that money.
Right. And I was like, I was just like upset. I was just like, I was depressed. And I remember talking to him and he said, "Jimmy, how much did you lose?" I was like, 50,000. He goes, "Okay. Imagine you went to you took an MBA program. You know how much those cost? Back then they were probably like 100. He
Yeah.
goes, he goes, you got a MBA crash course on how to start a
Yeah.
business, how to fail
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
50,000. He goes, it's a
Yeah.
deal." And I was looking at him like, "Does this guy have his mind? What are you talking about?" This
Yeah.
is, you know, but hindsight, I look back and I
Yeah.
go, it was probably one of the best things that ever happened to me, you
Yeah.
know?
Me going through, I went through the Founders Institute on 2018, but then going through all the subsequent cohorts as a mentor and being there every week, helping Jason run the cohort. Um, I got like a master's degree in this stuff because I saw all these presentations and then also, half the time is the founders pitching and they getting feedback. So I heard all of that. So
Mm.
my education, and I'm not paying anything for this, you know,
Just your time.
just my time. Why? Yeah. But it was like a free MBA, probably better than an MBA, right?
Also
Yeah.
the energy, the atmosphere, right?
Yeah.
So I'll give you an
Yeah.
example, like Founders Journey podcast, right? I started it a while ago. Every interview that I do, number one, I'm learning a great deal from
Yeah.
entrepreneurs like yourself,
Yeah.
and just like afterwards, just my mind is clear, like going through things, analyzing what I'm doing, how I could do better, or whatever. But the energy that I get for like music
Yeah.
to you was creative, right? Like you enjoyed music, it brought like joy and
Yep.
creativity to you. These interviews where I do with individuals like you brings energy and creativity to my life,
Yeah.
right? And
You
I love
know one thing I'll say about the music thing, now you bring it up, I heard music for years, but I didn't know how it was structured. I didn't know about harmony, I didn't know the circle of fifths, I didn't know about all the mechanics, you know? And it kind of it was like, learning a foreign language. When you learn if you learn French and all of a sudden you're like, "Wow, okay, now I know it," and now I understand it. And there's the same thing with the entrepreneurship thing. Now I understand it all. I understand, you know, how venture work. But before that, it was kind of a black box that I couldn't see into, and figuring it out was hard.
and also like coming from an immigrant family,
Yeah,
like I was first generation, whatnot,
yeah,
like they teach you don't take out debt. don't
Yeah,
all in
oh yeah,
on
they're
the
very
money, right?
conservative. They're
Which
very
is
conservative. Yeah,
completely opposite of startups, right? Because
yeah,
literally all you're doing is taking
yeah.
on
You burn it,
capital and debt
burning it.
and you're literally burning it in hopes that you can solve the problem, and the
Right,
entrepreneurs are okay with that, and it's like
right.
just a different mindset. So
You
so
got to
tell
have
me
a high
about
risk tolerance. You got to have a high risk tolerance. Yeah, you
so
really
tell
do.
Andy, so tell me about the 3rd company now. So the 2nd company you work what happened actually, what happened with the 2nd company? Because
The
you were
Summit company had a really good exit. It was essentially sold to a hedge fund, a smaller hedge fund. And I left that company in 2018 and it exited, I think, in 23.
okay.
And it had a 85 million valuation when it exited. So it did well. And third company is just gone through many pivots. Initially, the goal has always been the reason I started it was I'm one of those guys who likes to find new things to do, new restaurants, new bars, new activities, new stuff, and whatever the best is. And I noticed that I was at the time Meetup was hot. I would see stuff in Meetup, or I'd see stuff on Facebook, or but I never. I would think, well, why doesn't Meetup recommend this to me? I'd find it later. And I realized it's because my data is siloed in different apps. It's in Uber, it's in my payment app, it's in Facebook, it's in wherever. It's all these different apps. And I was thinking, well, why doesn't like Facebook just like swallow Twitter? Why don't they just offer the same, or why don't they do a better job of doing what Meetup does? And they kind of tried to go into that, and they did a very clumsy job of it. And I thought, what's really needed is like a super app, that does all these things, and your data is not so siloed. Well, that's not trivial, right? And then I learned later about WeChat in China and Line, I think it's called in Japan, that does some of that, but they had a lot of government help. So it's hard to figure out. So I came at it from a bunch of different ways. At one point, it was a parking app. I thought, I'll make people aware of services um, that are available. And Groupon actually tried to be this sort of, I've heard Eric Lakowski, who was, I think he's exited from there. He runs Tempest now, but he was the early money in on Groupon, and that was the goal of Groupon originally was, and that's a Chicago company, was to he said, why can I go on Kayak and see all my flights, hotels and car rental in one spot, but I can't see like barbershops and dog walkers and restaurants in one single app and then buy and pay for everything. Why can't I do that the way I can do with durable goods with Amazon, right? Or travel with Kayak. And so that's essentially what we're trying to do. We're trying to get to a super app, and we're not the only one trying to do it. Elon Musk said that he's trying to do that with X. He's trying to, I don't know if he still is, but it was at one point he was trying to go the WeChat direction with X. And they were going around the country and getting licenses for money transfer in all 50 states, which takes forever and is mind-bogglingly hard to do. So then we were a consumer app kind of doing what we're doing, and the CAC was too high and long-term value was too low. And then we pivoted and we were more B to B to C. And I came up with that by learning, because I learned what I studied other companies, and I saw that Amazon, when they first started, they were more B to B to C. They were their target customer early on was antiquarian booksellers, people who are buying tons and tons of books every month rather than just a few per year. And they've got a very big pain point going to stores and carrying books home and paying for them. Now they can just search online and find books that they can resell. Uber is another example. Their initial target was delivery drivers with downtime in San Francisco and business users in San Francisco who don't have the time to look for a hotel to get a cab. They just want to push a button on a phone wherever they get out of a meeting. And then the last example I think is like Facebook. When they were, you had to have a .edu account initially. They would go around university to university. They would customize the site to the university, put the course list on there. They'd have a big opening day with balloons and beer. And they were solving, just like Uber was solving a pain point for delivery drivers with downtime and business users who needed to get from A to B quick, or antiquarian booksellers with Amazon. I always like asking this question. What problem do you think Facebook was solving for those users?
Wasn't it to like hook up and meet people? That's
Well, yeah, they wanted to know whether so and so was dating somebody without having to ask them and get embarrassed, or ask their friends and get embarrassed. Now they can look online and see, oh, that person's available. They're single, and this person's not. And that's, besides not flunking out of college, that's the second biggest problem that peer group has. They're looking, for a significant other. And that got the flywheel going, and eventually it didn't make any more sense, and they opened it up to everybody, and those people graduated, from college, and then they're putting their Disney pictures and keeping up with their friends. But they got the flywheel going. It was brilliant. So along those lines, we were solving a pain point for business people who entertain frequently. This is newer. This is in the last year, that have to that in the middle market, they don't have an EA to help, manage all of the logistics of the getting recommendations and paying for everything and populating CRM tool and expense report, right? So we're automating it for that user, and then we're building in a rewards program similar to credit card points, that hopefully they'll use those points to take their family to a ball game in their private life, and they'll grow more consumer. And I think we finally figured out the mix, and we're partnering with a big credit card company, where I'm very excited about that, and working on some other partnerships with companies that are in the uh, run entertainment venues, like sports stadiums and concert venues and stuff like that. So I'm excited about what's going on. It's taken us a long time to get here. It's not an easy, but I think we finally have figured it out. We'll see.
it's interesting. I had a company that I started. It didn't go anywhere, but it was called Peak Booking, and it was about group reservations. So
Yep.
anything that was like 10 or more, not just
Yes.
restaurants, but activities,
Yes.
right? I want to go paintballing. I want to go
Yes.
quad racing. I need to book, like make a big reservation for some type of activity. Most of the small mom and pop stores don't have, they'll have packages that you have to
Yes.
call to speak to someone.
Yes.
So the idea was to create this platform, kind of like a Groupon, but for group reservations, right?
Yes.
And
That's a big pain point.
yeah, it's a huge pain point. Bachelor
Yes.
parties, birthday parties,
Yes.
anniversaries, all kinds of activities that
Yes.
people want to do. My idea was, it's the same amount of effort to make a reservation for 2 to 4 people versus 15, because
Right.
once you figure out the unit price,
Right.
and actually every booking will make more because there's more units in
Yeah.
that group,
Right.
even though the margin might be smaller, right? Because usually those group rates are a little bit better per person
Right.
versus making a small group, but over volume, we'd make enough. And we launched it, and I just didn't have the technological background. I'm not an engineer. I hired someone to do it. I'm more the front person. I'm the go out there, work out the deals, figure out the infrastructure, the partnerships, the marketing. But when it came
Yeah.
to like the technicality of it, I should have, if I would have had like more of like a technical co-founder, I think we could have gotten something going. And the pain's still there. Like, it's not like there's, I
Yep.
mean, where do you go to book these things? Like, I don't know, you know?
It's a manual process largely. You gotta call an events manager. Sometimes if it's a big enough group, there's a paper contract. You gotta pass the credit card over the phone. It's not automated. And sometimes there's a customized menu, right? And if you can automate that, you could solve pain for a lot of recurring,
Well, the
customers.
idea was, when we contact the vendor, our system is super easy. They're only allowed to offer 3 packages. So now it's very simple. You
Yeah.
create the 3 here's the bare minimum, here's the middle, here's the all out, everything you get,
Yeah.
right? All
Yep.
inclusive. And, and then you can put the margins, and then I was gonna do fractional payments. So what happens is, you have to put 20% down to book it, and then you
Yeah.
have a certain amount of time, and then you put each person's name and email, and they have to keep getting emailed until
Yeah.
they pay their fraction of it, right? Well,
Yeah.
maybe Andy, you want to pay the whole thing. That's fine, and you can chase your friends. But we were
Right.
going to a fractional payment system to collect all the money
Yeah.
and pool it, and then submit the full payment to the vendor, right?
Yeah.
But it's, look, I mean, I don't know. It was a lot of work, but I wanted to do it. I thought it was a pain point for
I
people.
mean, building it is not the hardest part, right? The hardest part is the uptake, getting
Yeah.
restaurants to use it and and that's why we're partnering with a credit card company.
Mm,
They've already got a built-in clientele that we think that this might work. So it's one of those things that's got a 1% chance, but that's kind of what I love.
yeah. So tell me, I wanted to ask you, what's your relationship with failure, right? Like trying, 'cause as an entrepreneur, we try, things work, we pivot, we do. What's your relationship with that?
I George Clooney had a good thing I saw he's been a little bit of an entrepreneur with his vodka business, or no, it wasn't vodka, it was
Tequila.
tequila
Yeah.
business. And also with his acting, he said, "Yeah, I learned nothing from my successes. I only learned from my failures." And whenever my kids, I've got my oldest is 24 and my youngest is 6. So, the kids are like early adults or late teens. They're every time they have a failure, they're devastated.
Yeah.
you know? And I'm like, no, you won't grow if you don't fail. It's part of life. You have to fail and you have to try to fail. You have to try things that you're probably going to fail at.
And be okay with.
And and be okay with it and just not let it be devastating. You see that with Elon Musk. He's 2 years younger than me, but he's been a huge influence on me. Um, the amount of risk he's able to take on and the acceptance of failure in the light of he's working towards a much bigger goal. And if he gets there, great. And if he doesn't, at least he tried. You heard Bezos say that about Amazon. At least if I didn't succeed, at least I won't die thinking I wish I would have tried.
Yeah. Sure.
And that's my relationship with it. And it's something you have to learn. I don't think anybody knows that intuitively. At least I didn't. I think you have to learn it and you have to hear that from people. And I talk about that a little bit in my book, that's failure's good. Don't try and do the same thing wrong twice, but take it as a learning experience and as a benefit.
And you mentioned Elon Musk was a good, a very inspirational person in your life. Is there anyone that was, very inspirational or in your life outside of the individuals you already mentioned?
Um, in the business world, you mean, or just in
Or
general?
life in general? Who was a good mentor to you and why?
Oh, like people I knew personally.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, there's a guy on our advisory board, Corey Wellfeld, who is a serial entrepreneur who got really helped, sat down with me and spent a lot of time with me, with Hubbub and got that going. He was a big inspiration. Um, People I know personally, though.
It doesn't have to be too many. I mean,
Yeah,
just
I mean, I would cite him for sure. As soon as we get off this, I'm gonna think of 3 more people. I'm just like,
and you're like, I'm
uh,
so sorry I didn't mention you. So
yeah,
I don't know the question. What is your like if you could go back to your 20-year-old self, right?
yeah.
Because you mentioned your kids and failure and trying, like, what would you tell your 20-year-old self knowing
Read
what
my
you know now?
read my book is what I'm gonna say. I've condensed so much, 30, I'm 56 years old. How is it? I graduated high school 37 years ago or something like that. It's almost 40 years worth of learning into that stuff that I wish I would have known. But and just to summarize it, I mean, the purpose we work is, we participate in I'm very religious. We participate in God's creation by doing that. And then also, but not only that, we're not only tilling the garden and as Adam did from day one, but where it also affects you. It helps you grow in the virtues. So a difficult coworker or a stressful situation helps you grow in patience. Failure helps you grow in humility, right? I'd be the most arrogant person in the world if I didn't have failure, you know, because I think I'm just a genius. And all of those things. So not only that, you're working for a purpose to, till the soil and make it a better garden essentially, but also it affects you, and really pay attention to how it affects you. If you're doing something for work that affects you in a not a good way, then maybe that's not for you. You should go find something else. Um, I would also say, network. I mean, there's so many more opportunities for that now. All these schools have entrepreneurship programs, and there's so much, especially if you're probably not in Morris, Illinois, but if you're in any city of any size, there's all kinds of in-person networking. Not just don't do the online's great. I have a big LinkedIn presence, and actually because of Corey Warfeld, the guy I mentioned earlier, that's why I do that. I'm not naturally a social media type person. So the online is important. You should do it, but don't only do that. You need to go and meet people and be in whatever it is, even if it's not entrepreneurship, if it's, you know, literature, sports, or whatever, movies. With this documentary film thing now, I'm discovering there's a whole Chicago filmmaking ecosystem I didn't know about, that I'm now kind of finding my way into, and meeting great people that will help me and guide me, and tell me about things I didn't know about. Um, it's all about exchange of knowledge and information, but some of that has to happen in person. I think that mostly what I would, and persevere. I don't think people are naturally, learn to persevere. That's one of the virtues you kind of grow in, is perseverance, and that makes all the difference. You have heard everybody from, and you hear everybody from Rockefeller to Steve Jobs and onwards say the only thing that separates the successful from the unsuccessful is perseverance. No matter what you're doing, building a company, trying to be an athlete, trying to be a good, husband or father or whatever, you got to persevere.
Yeah. There was a time when I was young, my family was like, we didn't have a lot of money and such. And somehow, I don't
Yep.
know why I came up the idea that if I became an entrepreneur, I'd make a lot of money fast, which is,
Yeah.
it's funny because it's not true. uh,
Rarely.
yeah. So, but anyway, when I got into it, I started learning, I started meeting people, and there was this creativity, this freedom, like what you mentioned. When you got into it, you enjoyed it. And I guess I just always thought, like, what, like, I got into it to make the money. And then when the money never came, or it came much, much later, I enjoyed, I realized I discovered something. And my mom, was a seamstress, didn't make a lot of money, and she was always worried about me. "Jimmy, go get a job, go get
Yeah.
security." But
Yeah.
there was this, like, voice in my head saying, "Jim, just keep going a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more."
Right.
Like, and as I kept learning and failing and discovering more, and piquing my curiosity and my skill set, I was like, wow, I was like, I think I could keep going. I was young, I didn't have a lot of bills. Obviously, when you're married and you have kids, it's
Yeah.
much, right? It's a little harder.
Yeah.
Uh, so tell me, what do you think about entrepreneurship in America right now? Do you think it's booming? Do you think there's a lot of infrastructure? Because I know, based on where we grew up, there wasn't much content, there wasn't
No.
meetups and stuff. But do you also think that it's become more tech entrepreneurs? Like, is there meetups for people that want to start small businesses and things like that? Like, what's your take on that?
I'm not in the small business space, but I do get emails and stuff like that. In Chicago, in particular, there is an ecosystem for that. I don't go to those things, but there are small business expos. The city of Chicago does the webinars for people who want to start small businesses. I guess you could say that's true of the retail business I'm trying to help start. We do, there we do dabble in the grant world and stuff like that for that business. And so I do see that there is some um for that. It's in a big city. Now, like in a small city I grew up in, probably not. You probably have to find your own way. But I mean, there's so much video content now. One of the things we found with the Founders Institute is that we used to do more presentations, um, and we do less of that now. We've actually gone a little bit further into the one-on-one feedback because the content and the presentations, is free on YouTube, or Y Combinator does a free thing online now. So even if you're in a small town, as long as you got internet access,
Oh,
and now with Starlink, you could be in the middle of the ocean or on a mountaintop and still get it. So,
okay.
you know,
Right.
you know,
So, that-
you could be
so
you could be in Nairobi and still have access to all that stuff.
is there any last thoughts that you want to leave new or fresh entrepreneurs? Any books or any framework that you want to share with them?
I think books are important. I do have a list on my LinkedIn, and I've learned so much. I'm a big reader. Everything from Lean Startup Method to Zero One, Hard Thing About Hard Things from Horowitz is good. Um, Burn Rate is from Andy Dunn, a local Chicago founder, is really great. So I that one's more of a story about his journey, but like Lean Start Methods or Venture Deals is a great book. It's very
Cheers.
technical.
Okay.
I do recommend reading. Always be reading a book if you're interested in that space or whatever you're interested. I'm and I do talk about this in the book I wrote. Self education is so important, and whenever I hire somebody for one of my companies, that's one of the things I'm looking for. I'm looking for a self educator because they tend to be people who can solve problems without somebody helping them all the time. Which in startups, you don't have time to always help people. So I'm always looking for people who are always self educating, whether it's reading books or watching podcasts or watching videos or going somehow learning new things. And if you're a student of history, everybody from Caesar Augustus, not Caesar Augustus, the first Caesar, but probably Caesar Augustus as well, but it's the first Caesar, the one we all know about. Through Napoleon, through Andrew Carnegie, they were huge self-educators. Even Henry Ford, who really didn't like to read, he found other ways of educating himself. And all those people, you'll never see anybody successful as a general politician or a business owner or who didn't self-educate. Even LeBron James. I mean, he came into the NBA and really, he, people don't give him enough credit for how much self-education he did about not only the game and his opponents, but also how to maintain his body
Yeah.
and be able to play at 42 years old. And whatever it is, that would be my one big piece of advice: self-educate.
Very good. Very good.
Yep.
Thank you, man. This has been great.
Uh,
I love your story. Everything. The information's been fantastic. Any last thoughts before we wrap up?
No, it's great. Thanks for doing this. I'm happy. I hope it's useful to some people. And I guess that's the last thought. If anybody wants to contact me, you'll find me on LinkedIn. You see my name, Andy Cwik. I'll pop up, and I'm responsive to messages as long as you're not trying to sell me something.
Andy, this has been great. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you could join us on the Founders Journey podcast, and I know this is going to inspire someone in our network. And thank you for your background and your story and your journey.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.